Hey folks, it's Patriot Nurse. What's going on in LA right now is not just another protest. This is a crisis that strikes at the very heart of our nation and our Constitution. Federal troops are on the ground in California. You have local officials defying the law, defying good and constitutional purview of the federal government. In this video, I'm going to break down what is really going on, what the Constitution says about it, and how this could be a turning point for the United States of America. Let's get started. So just to give you an overview as to what's been happening over the past several days, ICE enforcement has been forestalled by the collaboration of local officials and violent mobs effectively showing up, committing acts of terrorism, acts of violence, use of deadly force against officers of the federal government who were lawfully executing their authority per the Constitution. In the ensuing aftermath, President Trump had federalized National Guard troops in California, but also now has sent the Marines in. Many people are saying right now that this is a crisis, that this is an overreach of federal power. I find it interesting that Gavin Newsom, for the first time that I can remember, ever called our nation a republic. He loved to use the term democracy. So he's a shrewd fellow, and he understands how to use the dog whistle of certain catchwords to get the mob on his side, regardless of which side of the aisle they fall on. What we really have to understand is the presence of federal law enforcement inside and against the state's authority. This has a precedent, and some of this is a little dicey. We're going to get into actually the historical precedent, not only from a constitutional standpoint, but also from effectively what we're seeing in California repeating a war of the past. So the war that I'm referring to is actually the War of 1812. Most people have no idea what this war was fought over. Effectively, what was going on in the United States, to give this a very cursory overlook here, is that you had British naval assets kidnapping Americans abroad. The British would press into service American navalmen and really any American able-bodied man that they would find at sea. They would press them into service, they would officially kidnap them, and they would deny them our constitutional rights. One of the other things that's not so well known is the fact that the British were sending armaments, weapons, and in some cases training and collaboration to the frontier areas at the time, Michigan, Indiana, to incite violent uprisings of Native Americans against white settlers. So does this sound familiar? In the case of LA, we've got the mayor who effectively says, stand down and let people who are illegal and violent and advocating for the overthrow of the United States Constitution with socialism in many cases. She wants the local law enforcement to stand down. And in doing so, is violating the civil rights of every one of her lawful citizen constituents. But she is also conspiring and collaborating with these same violent people inside the United States to thwart the good and proper governance of our Constitution's parameters. So the Founding Fathers understood that these things happen. And so they gave us a Constitution to withstand the test of time that would both balance the federal authorities and the local state powers. This is one of the reasons why we have a 10th Amendment, which is the 10th of the Bill of Rights to the Constitution. Now, Gavin Newsom, over the past few days, has been bloviating about this separation of powers, like the first time ever that he's conveniently invoked it. And in this has tried to get people to say, oh no, this is a violation of state powers. No, not so easy. So let's ask the question then, why is it that federal troops were sent into Los Angeles? Effectively, it was because your local law enforcement and the local officials were thwarting the proper execution of the powers that the United States Constitution gives the federal government. That is ICE. So the federal government does have the authority to secure and police the border and also to set immigration status. That lies with Congress as a power. But also, the enforcement of this lies with the federal executive branch. That is the president and his appointees. There's also a little bit more to this. California, while California does have its own parameters and rights from the states, even though states don't have rights, people have rights. The states and powers have authority, but the people maintain the rights. The state has the authority to govern over the murky area that isn't specifically outlined as the federal power in the Constitution. But check this out. Immigration is not one of those areas. The security of the border for the United States is indeed the purview of the federal government. California does not have the authority to rewrite that immigration for the rest of the country. And so then we are coming to a reality where the actions of California are directly jeopardizing and threatening the life, liberty, and property of the rest of the nation. And here's how that works. Because of California's elected officials refusing to allow the proper enforcement from the federal government, and then B, actively conspiring against them and supporting violence against them, they're not only supporting violence against the federal government, California's elected officials are indeed supporting violence against every other citizen of every other state in the United States of America. Because by harboring people who shouldn't be here in the first place, by preventing the deportation of violent criminals, and by default supporting the nexus that is the drug cartels, the violent drug cartels that have come all the way up into California and indeed are operating effectively in most states in the United States, to my knowledge. California's refusal to support the federal enforcement of these people being removed now jeopardizes people in, for instance, Nebraska, Missouri, Pennsylvania, Oklahoma, Idaho. Because California is doing this and is trying to thwart the immigration enforcement from the federal government doesn't really have a choice. They have to intervene. When you further consider that many of these so-called protesters, which are violent agitators, these people are agitating for the overthrow of our republic.
We don't agree with the term illegal. We're undocumented. We've been here for thousands of years before you guys showed up, screw up everything. We think we should organize together with the U.S. working class and fight together and create a better system. We're anti-capitalist. We think socialism does work.
Is there a country we can look to kind of model the socialism idea?
The only model would be Soviet Union the first 4 years.
Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution mandates that every state has a Republican form of government. If you have law enforcement in California, in LA, who are turning a blind eye to violent insurrections for the purpose of overthrowing the government, they are collaborators and conspirators. And at this point, this is where the Insurrection Act comes up. Ironically, the president's administration is specifically not invoking this, probably because they do not want to start a firestorm and they don't want to stoke fires against the accusations that they are the authoritarians. But it's very murky. It's very murky here. And the reason that they have not invoked the Insurrection Act, I think, is more one of optics rather than realities. Now, for those of you who know me and have followed this channel for a while, you will know that I am no fan of federal power. I think that in the majority of cases, they are a great form of evil, and that the state governments are a lesser form of evil. If men were angels, no government would be necessary, in the words of our founding fathers. But the reality is this, friend, that in the case of previous shows of federal power against the will of the states, the most recent one that I can think is actually the LA riots with Daddy Bush. But going back even further, Eisenhower sent in and utilized the Insurrection Act to enforce civil rights and integration of blacks and whites in Arkansas. The situation that we're facing right now in LA is far more perilous than integrating blacks and whites in Arkansas. We're talking about an entire nation's life, liberty, and property being jeopardized by the actions of California. Now, the Second Amendment actually can come to shine here in this, because a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of the free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, shall not be infringed. Of all of the states who have done the most infringing in violation of the Second Amendment, which one comes to mind? California. Jersey and New York are up there. California is pretty freaking bad. Is it any wonder then that they want their good people, their lawful citizens, the people who should be here, they want them disarmed? But they are collaborating with people who are carrying cinder blocks and backpacks and taking hammers and breaking them into pieces to be hurled as deadly force at law enforcement officers and at anyone who just happens to cross by their path who they don't like at the time. The Second Amendment was written for such a time as this. Our founding fathers knew of a way, followed the way, and gave us a way to avoid federal power if the states didn't want to do what the feds said to do. So this is a reality that a lot of people poo-poo, but it's very legit. And that is the right of secession. If California deems that the laws of the United States of America and the enforcement thereof by the federal government is no longer in the best interest of their constituency, then they should secede lawfully. But here's the thing. If California wants to become a hotbed and a petri dish for violent thugs, criminals, illegal aliens, and the cartel and transnational foreign entities that are totally taking over their streets right now, then they should be able to secede, but the rest of the country has the right to defend itself from them. Which means then that if California doesn't want the federal government, it doesn't want to play ball by the Constitution, then they get to be their own country with no federal funds, no federal tax dollars, and the surrounding states that border them get to erect border security to protect their citizens. So really, when it comes right down to it, I have taught in LA before. There are good people there. But the issue is that California now has been overtaken by people who hate the rest of the constituents of the United States. They hate the rest of the states, and they've evidenced this by jeopardizing their lives, their liberties, and their property, and allowing violent criminal aliens to stay in their borders, to harbor them, to give them tax dollars, and to advocate for their rights above the citizens, and to literally support and fight for them against the federal government. That is an insurrection. If you don't want federal power in there, then you need to secede. We're taking all of the federal tax money with us, and then the rest of the country can put up a wall to keep you out. Very simple. The last time that we saw significant riots in LA, the Koreans actually came to the foray because they were the immigrant community who defended their property. You probably remember seeing pictures up on the rooftops, even maybe videos of people up on the rooftops defending their property with firearms. And when you're looking at mobs blocking traffic, taking deadly force into their hands, attacking police officers, firebombing things, this is not a safe place to be. And the citizenry have been softened up by the state of California, and certainly by Southern California's elected officials, to be sheep ripe for the slaughter for these criminals that, when you think about it, the officials want more, and they want to protect these criminals more than the children of American citizens. So California's got to figure out what California wants to do. And the rest of the nation, if California refuses to leave the union, and instead they want to stay in and drag the union down, effectively, then the rest of the nation should be more than willing to defend itself from them. And unfortunately, this is a case where the Insurrection Act actually does apply, and federal powers in good and lawful government would be appropriately executed to send in federal troops to quell what's going on there. But we're absolutely being invaded. There's no question. We are being invaded, and we have states that are collaborating to keep our invaders here. And this looks to me more like the War of 1812 than anything that I've seen. Friends, please share this video with one person who you know would be benefited from it, and have these conversations. Have them in the car, have them around your dinner table, have them whenever you're getting together with folks. We need to be talking realistically about the times that we're in, and also be preparing for them providentially. One of the reasons why I've dedicated the amount of work over a decade of my life on this channel now to helping people prepare is that for years and years, personally, I and many of you who are students of history have seen this coming. And the challenge is, when you are a student of history, you can see these things put together, but when you plead with people and you warn people, they will often accuse you of saying, you're blowing things out of proportion. Oh, are you saying Civil War again? Have people said this to you before? Leave me a comment below. There's reality, friends. In the short amount of time that I've been doing videos on this channel, which is at over a decade of my life, that is a blip. That is a blink in the eye of human history. This nation, prior to the war between the states in 1861, 30 years, people were talking about the inevitability of conflict. So 10 years isn't a drop in the bucket. I may be early, but I'm not wrong. The United States very, very realistically could devolve into pockets of chaotic urban warfare over this summer. We need to be prepared for this, friends. Beans, bullets, and band-aids. I've been advocating this for a while, and I know a lot of y'all follow this channel for that. From the medical standpoint, guys, I've said this before. I'll say it again. I've mentioned it in class, right? Where are most of your trauma hospitals in big cities? They're downtown. They're near universities. Where are most of these protests, i.e. arson fests, where are they likely to happen? Downtown, near universities. So if you know that you or your family members have medical needs, or for instance, there's a recurring need, you do not want to be in a position where you have to go to a hospital or you need to seek care when these people are blocking traffic, lighting cars on fire, dragging people out of their cars, beating them to death. This is real. This is not hyperbole. This is historical fact. These things happen. So one of the reasons why I've created these online courses, and one of the reasons why I've taught so many years on the road, is because I want people to be prepared. I don't want you to be stuck. Please hear me. I do not want you to be stuck in a situation where you can't render aid to people and you can't care for your family's medical needs at home, and you are forced to get in the car and drive them out there. Because here's the thing, folks. The ambulances are not going to show up for you. You will fail your EMT exam if you first do not ask, is the scene safe? The EMTs are not going to show up in a scene of violence until it's been declared safe and a perimeter has been established. If there has been some type of violent action by law enforcement, they're not going to show up. So if you have a need for your family member, whether it's 10 o'clock at night or 2 a.m. or heck, even 3 in the afternoon, if you're near a rioting zone and that area is not safe, ambulances are not going to show up for you. You have to be able to care for your family. And this is one of the reasons why I've created the online courses. One of the things also that we're going to be doing, just straight dope talk right now, friends. One of the things we're going to be doing, Lord willing, over the next few weeks and months is we're going to be revamping the Patreon page. And we're going to be, Lord willing, we're going to be bringing back the Sunday evening live streams and basically the weekend roundups that I was doing actually during COVID. If you remember those, I know a lot of you guys have been asking me to get back to it. And so in order to effectively do quality control and make sure that we have only beneficial and thoughtful people in the chat, we're going to be, Lord willing, moving that over to Patreon so you can participate there. But definitely we've done some rehauling of the Patreon page and be able to offer some more value for you guys there. So check that out. Of course, the Patreon links are in the description box below. Friends, if you did enjoy this video, I hope you'll share it and subscribe. But also, friends, like more than sharing and subscribing and liking, because this is for the algorithm. This is to defeat the suppression that de facto has been a thing for conservative voices. I would like you to reflect on this video and to reflect on the wisdom of the founding fathers. These men were so light years ahead of smart compared to anything that's running around there here nowadays. And they knew human nature. They knew human nature because they were students of history. They didn't need a bunch of letters after their name. They didn't need plaques on the wall ascribing to them authority status or expert status. Heck no. These were righteous men who worked the ground. They were farmers, but they knew human history and they knew human nature. You know those things? No wonder that they could put together such a beautiful constitution. They feared God. And the Constitution was written for such times as this. The question is, are we going to be facing a reality where once federal power has been foisted upon the states, that it doesn't draw down when it should? That's something you got to watch out for. Because once you break spades on federal power, you have a very, very clear defined mission. Mission creep is very real when it comes to the feds. They love to use tax dollars to expand their empire, wherever it is. So I don't care who's at the head of it. If it is being done with wide and broad parameters, with no clear intention in sight and a plan for drawing down afterwards, that's a problem. So we should be vigilant against this. And again, the Second Amendment was written for such times as these, when you have local feckless governments and governments that are actually conspiring with foreign invaders to kidnap, to mutilate, to harm, to commit violence against American citizens. This is why we have a Second Amendment. And just another thing as me shooting straight here to you, friends. California has a lot of good people there. Actually, the largest class that I ever taught was in Sacramento. Ironically, it's the largest class I ever taught. And I had such amazing people show up there. So I don't want it to sound like I poo-pooing on California. The good people and God-fearing people in California who are stuck there, who can't get out there for whatever reason. You're doing the righteous thing and you're caring for an elderly parent or a grandparent or some configuration where you would like to find greener pastures, so to speak, but you're stuck there. I ain't talking about these people. When you look at what happens with wickedness once it gets in a populace, it is a steady trot to destruction. The hotbed for all of the Cultural Revolution was San Francisco. And California from the 60s, well, really with the beatniks forward, so really in the 50s all the way forward, California has been a hotbed for anti-biblical agendas and for a population that steadily embraced wickedness to the point where it has infected the rest of the nation. I mean, look at which month this is happening in right now. Self-righteous abomination of Pride Month. There's a spiritual aspect of things. And when you have a nation or an area, a principality given over to wickedness, that spreads and infects things. And this wickedness took root in California. California was the petri dish for the destruction of our nation in the 50s and 60s, I would argue. But then, now we're eating the bitter fruit of it. The thing is, John Adams said this. He said, the Constitution is only for amoral and religious people. It is wholly unsuited to any other. When men are not bound by God's laws, they will be bound by another man's chains. And so then it becomes effectively a contest of force. When you have governments, whether the federal or the state or the local, when you have governments that don't fear God and that oppress the innocent, like has been happening to God-fearing people for a very long time in this nation, you're going to get more of the say unless good people are empowered to stand up. Our founders understood this, and this is why we have a Second Amendment. You must be capable in your own self-defense. You must be armed. And no, we don't ask permission for this. Our life was given to us by God. We don't ask permission from a man to defend it. These people who are committing these heinous acts of violence are wicked, they are vile, and they are flowing in a power that is demonic. Ultimately, when you have a nation that has devolved to such a place as ours, it is merely a contest of force. This is one of the reasons why I will never ask permission to defend myself. And this is one of the reasons why if anybody dares in my presence tell me that I don't need a rifle or I don't need weapons of war, this, what you're seeing right now is exactly why we need rifles. And furthermore, when somebody comes at me with that, I like to immediately counter with a good question. What qualitative experience gives you any authority to have an opinion on this subject? Are you familiar with deadly force and violent crime statistics? Are you familiar with how fast it is that violent crime can be committed from someone at a distance? Oh, that's right. You know nothing. So in that case, clamp it. No, we don't ask permission to defend ourselves from these people. And ultimately, it is my hope that good people will defend themselves. I hope this video was a blessing to y'all. Please share it. Please get this word out. Please share it with one person in your sphere that would be benefited from it, friends. We definitely need to be alert. We need to be in prayer, but also be aware of the times, man. Be aware of the times. It's obvious to me the reason why this is happening when it is because there are dark and demonic powers behind this. This is like we are not wrestling against the weapons in the physical realm here, friends. We are fighting some very, very dark forces. And these dark forces have their outlets and they get their strength from doing wicked and demonic things. And the scriptures are very replete in talking about this. Stay prepared, guys. I appreciate you. May the Lord bless and keep you all. Thank you for sharing your time with me here on the channel. Thanks for sharing your evening, afternoon. Thanks for hanging out with me. I appreciate you. And I hope the video was a blessing to you. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. For now, it's Patriot Nurse signing off. I'll see y'all later. Bye.